Okay, guys, so my Metasploitable 3 machine is running. I think we have gone through Metasploitable 1, Metasploitable 2, so you are actually familiar with the process, what you need to do. However, every time we have a different virtual machine, we have a different exploit, and we just learn how to use that particular exploit and then exploit the virtual machine, right? So Metasploitable 3, the first thing you need to do is because you don't have the username and password for this, so the first thing obviously you need to do is to find out the IP address of the target machine. Make sure if if it is a bridge network, you make sure that both the machines are on the bridge. If it is a NAT, make sure both the virtual machines are on NAT so that you can actually access that virtual machine. So in this case, I'm just running net discover -r and then give the network address that I want to scan. And you can see that I have 4 IP addresses. The target machine that I'm running is actually 36.128. So I can copy this and then I'll just clear the screen or leave it. Maybe I need it again. The next thing that I want to do is to run an nmap scan, just like we do in every exploitation exercise. That first we want to find out the services which are running. However, I want to show you something that so -sv and then the IP address of the target machine. So this basically will give you the services which are running, the ports which are open, and the version of the service that can be exploited. However, you can see here that when you run nmap -sp with the IP address, it actually doesn't scan all the ports. And we know that there are more than 65,000 ports. So sometimes I don't know exactly till which point it actually scans the ports. Means does it scan 1,000 ports or 20,000 or 30,000 or maybe 10,000, the first 10,000 ports? Apparently, it looks like that it didn't give us. Well, we don't know until we scan it. But like I said, in some cases, you may want to run a scan on all the ports that are there, right? 65,000 ports. So you see that it does list some services like ProFTPD, OpenSSH, Apache, Samba, CUPS, MySQL, Jetty. However, if you want to find out, let's say that maybe there are some ports which are not scanned by the nmap, then you can try to use the -p option in nmap, which is -p is for the port, and then you can actually list the ports from which port to which port you want to scan. Obviously, you can scan one particular port as well, and you can scan a whole range of ports as well. So if you use nmap -sp and then -p to 0 to 65,535 port, it basically will go and try to scan all the ports and try to find out if there are any other services which were not actually listed here. This time when it scans all the ports, probably those services will also pop up. So let's just wait for the results of -p and we'll compare that if we have any other services which nmap did not scan without the -p option. And I think I told you that you can even scan one particular port as well. If you just write -p and then write 80, for example, it is going to scan only port 80 and try to find out if any service is running on it. However, you can see here that I put -p 0 to 65535. This is the total number of ports that are available on any operating system. So let's just give it some time. In the meantime, I will open a new terminal and I will start my Metasploit framework. Okay, so if we try to compare this with this one, we have FTP, SSH, HTTP, NetBIOS, IP, PV in both. We have point-to-point, we have MySQL on both HTTP. You can see that we found another service which is running here, which is IRC, the Unreal IRC, the chat application, whereas it is not shown here, it's missing on in this side, right? So at least we found one more application which is running, and sometimes it's helpful in exploiting these services, right? So this is something that, you can always do. It's not really recommended, to be honest, that you scan every single port if you're doing a real penetration testing or ethical hacking exercise, because when Nmap, you try to scan every single port, it raises and alerts into the IDS and firewall. So it's usually recommended to scan limited number of ports. Maybe you can go with this option initially, but like I said, I'm just giving you uh, information about if you are looking for some ports which might not be coming in the scan, and that might be vulnerable, right? Okay. Um, so once we have the ports, and also I think you can see one more thing. Fabric is running here on 3500, which was not actually shown here as well. So yeah, we found like two applications that were not seen in this. Okay, the next thing is go back to our Metasploit framework. So the Metasploit framework, you guys are familiar with the MSF console. So um, there was a GUI version of Metasploit as well. I don't know if it's still continuing. I used it a long time back. I forgot the name. Uh, does anyone remember the GUI version of Metasploit? It was called. Anyways, I will try to find it out and see if it is still supported. It's interesting to see because in that you don't need to write any commands. You just simply execute whatever payload you can select from the GUI. Okay, the next step is to find the exploit. So first of all, pro FTPD, we did it last time as well, but I think we used a different version of the pro FTPD exploit. So there are more than one pro FTPD exploits available. Sorry. So I will just search for pro FTPD. And you can see that I think if I'm not wrong, the last time that we used was a backdoor version. So we have another exploit, which is um, this one for the same version, mod_copy. So this time I will use this exploit and see what kind of options we need to configure. So you just copy the exploit and paste it. And then you can write show options to see what are the things that you need to set. So we need to set the R host, which is, something required. Proxies you don't really need. Um, the R port is already configured. The FTP port is also configured. The site path is given there. Absolute writable website path, and then SSL not required, and then so and obviously you need to configure the payload as well, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is that I will set the R host. So the R host was 36.137. So set R host, paste, and then one more change that you have to do is the site path, which is /var/www. So you just make sure that it is HTML. the whole path is actually /spot/w/html. So set the site path to HTML. Okay, and then set the payload. So usually we use the command line path. Sorry, the command line payload. So you can use a different payload this time, which could be so command Unix. Again, this will give you basically a reverse path, a reverse shell. It's not a meta predator, it will be a command shell, right? And let me just double check now. The only thing I think missing once you give the payload is the local host. So we also need the local host in this case, because otherwise the session will not complete. If I run the exploit, it says that the exploit completed, but no session was created because the L host is missing, right? So the L host is the IP address of the Linux 36.128. So I will set the L host 36.128 and then run the exploit. So it's trying to exploit the FTP application and trying to get a command shell. So once you get this message that the command shell session 1 has been opened, it basically means that you are inside the machine. As you can see, you can run the Linux commands, which is ls, for example, to see what are the files there. If you want to move to the home directory, for instance, you can move to the home directory. I think we are in the home directory. You can run who am I. So now how the attacker is going to use it, there are different things. He may try to access some certain files. He may want to copy the file, download the file, delete the files, maintain access to the system, and lots of things can be done, right? Another thing that you have to keep in mind is that maybe you don't want to close this session and you want to keep it in the background and then try to open another session with the virtual machine, so you can have multiple sessions. So for that, what you can do is you can write background, I guess. Yeah. So when we type the command background, it says, do you want to background the session 1? I can say yes. So the session is in the background, so I don't need to exploit it again. If I want to interact with the session again, I can just write sessions minus I is to interact and then the session number 1. So it basically starts the interaction with the session 1 again. So you don't need to come out of the session or exit it and exploit it again, because it is usually not recommended that you keep on exploiting the machine again and again. Right? So because the more you exploit, there are more chances that you may get detected in that case. Okay. So let me take it to the background again. Okay. Now, while this session is in the background, I can go ahead and try to exploit it again with some other vulnerability, for instance. So I will go back again and I will choose another exploit. And by the way, before and after Nmap, the recommended thing to do is to, um, to run the vulnerability scanner to find exactly what vulnerabilities are there, right? So we skip that part because I'll have to set up the Nessus again, and we have gone through it, like how you use Nessus, how you will find out the vulnerabilities, right? So I'm skipping the scanning part, but that is what needs to be done in an actual penetration testing. All right, so now we will try to use another exploit, the HTTP exploit. Let me just see, because here we have the Apache running on port 80, right? We have another HTTP application WebRec running. So let me search. Sorry. Oh, there are too many exploits. So I will just go for the CGI exploit. Like I said, this information you can find once you run an Nmap scan, sorry, the NISA scanner, and then it will tell you exactly what vulnerability is there and what exploit you can use. You can also use internet to find out a certain version of the Apache is exploitable and what exploit can be used. So again, this exploit also gives the remote code execution um, for the attacker. Uh, so I'm going to use this shell shock exploit. And by the way, this second is not an exploit. Okay, this is an auxiliary scanner. Um, I will come to auxiliary scanner later, but this scanner actually works like Nmap kind of thing. Sometimes the Nmap is blocked. So you can use auxiliary scanners. I've done this plenty of times. Where Nmap is not working, you can use auxiliary scanners to scan the open ports on a system. Okay, so this is not an exploit. The exploit which is available is this one. So I'm going to use this particular exploit this time. I will say show options. Now in this, you have to set the R host, which is required, the target URI, the URL, the path is required. And probably if I change, yeah, so the payload is already there, which is Metasploitable payload, which is interesting because Metasploitable gives you more access to the system than the command shell. And we have seen this previously in some of our, labs, right? So the only thing I think we need to set is the R host, okay? And then we just need to set the URL path, okay? So let me see here, set the R host 192.168.36.147. And then set the target URI, which is /CGI bin, and then run the exploit. So if you see now, the message that it gives you is that a Metasploitable session 2 has been opened. So you still have the access to the previous session. So if you want to interact with any session, you just have to write sessions -i for interact and give the number of the session you want to interact, right? So Metasploitable, like I said, gives you much more power than the other exploit that is the other payload, sorry, we ran. So this is the process list, for example. And now you can actually see, much more about the operating system, that what processes are running on that. Some of them, they are listed in the Nmap, like Pro FTPD. We know that this is running. We found it using the Nmap. IRCD, we also found it, but now you have actually much more details about what kind of processes they are running on this operating system, right? MySQL, Getty, Ruby, and the level of access that you can see these processes they have is also very interesting, because some of them they have, most of them they have the root access. So you can try to migrate to one of these processes to gain access. Let me just see what kind of user is this. Who am I? It's not working. What was the command? If you want help with the Metasploitable, just type help, and you will see all the commands that are there that you can use. Like, for example, if I'm interested in looking at the ARP cache of this victim, I can just write ARP What the ARP cache does is that it actually brings out the host to which this machine has been communicating. So maybe in some cases the attacker wants to move to another target, for instance. So he finds out that okay, on this network I have another target with which this machine has been communicating, like 36.67, for instance, and then you try to you know gain access to those systems as well, right? Um, some of these things they work only if it is there. Like if the mic is attached to the system, you can list that there is a mic, and you can stop the mic, you can start the mic, you can start listening or capturing the audio on the system. But in this case, because it's a VM and it doesn't have access to my mic, it won't really work. But I can just show you how you run this. Um, it just says here that the operation failed. And like I said, because there's no mic attached to my VM, right? You can kill the processes, get the user ID. And this is what I was looking for. Get the user ID. So you can see the username that I have is www-data, for instance, in this case, right? Okay, so you can do whatever you want with the Metasploiter. You can shut down the system if you like. If you just write shut down, it is going to shut down. I'm not going to do that because we are continuing with the lab. So I'm going to exit it from the Metasploit. So I have demonstrated two exploits to you. You can also, because there's SQL service is also running there here, so you can try with the SQL injection attack as well, obviously. So if I open this URL to see what's going on here, for example, so you can see this payroll login. It basically has a username and password fields. So you can use the SQL injection queries. You can also use the automated tools like SQL map, for example, if you want to find out. And I think we will do it in some other lab. Or have you done it before, the SQL map? Guys, you listening?
Yes, with you, doctor.
Yeah, so you guys have done the SQL map before or no?
Skill map? No.
No. Okay, we will do it in one of the labs, in the coming labs, because the next whole week is about the pen testing as well, right? Maybe I will also give you some interesting attacks which are not there on the platform. So as an
Yes,
extra labs,
please.
I will show you guys really some interesting attacks that you can launch. Okay. Now, for this one, you can use the simple queries like this. For example, single quote or one equal to one hash. It's a very basic SQL injection attack. Um, so if this application is vulnerable, it basically will list down. You can see the usernames, the first name, the last name, the salary, and stuff like that. Like I said, I mean, these kind of attacks usually, they have gone out, but still there are, organizations which are still running very, legacy applications, and they don't have proper sanitization. So you never know that what you come across, right? There's another query. I'm going to provide you with these queries that I'm running. If you see this second query that I ran, it actually has listed the username and the password. So if you see, scroll down here, you can see that not only that we have got this information pulled from the table, but we have also got the information about some users and then these passwords, right? Now, you may not be sure whether you can access the system by using these username and password, but we do know that we have an SSH service which is running on this machine. So we can try, for example, and we have done it before, that once we find out the SSH, we try with the username and passwords, to see if it is actually accessible or not. So if you can use the tool that we discussed last time, in which we were able to try to brute force by using the dictionary, not the brute force. You can use that method as well. But since we have already got the username and passwords by using SQL injection, you can try this user with this password, for instance. So if I want to SSH, for instance, this host, which is the target with the username uh, Lee underscore Organa. Yeah, Organa. So we can try to SSH it, and then it is asking me for the password. If I want to try, I can use the password that we just got, right? And there you go. So you have the SSH connection as well. So remember, guys, when you are doing the penetration testing, you need to be more creative. You need to think about different options. It is not always that you will be able to exploit straight away by finding an exploit and get into the system. You may have to find different ways to reach the system. Sometimes it could be the exploit that is directly executable. Sometimes you may have to access some hidden URLs. Sometimes you may have to upload and execute some, malicious application. Sometimes you may have to, send a URL and try to hack them. So Metasploit also provides you with this option that you can create a malicious URL. So when the user clicks that URL, the payload that it gets executed, and then basically you get access to the system, right? So for this particular lab, I have demonstrated you three ways to access this system, in which we use two exploits, and then we use the SQL injection, and then we try to. Now there might be other vulnerabilities also which are present. So what I want from you guys is that at the minimum, you have to do what I just demonstrated to you, these three ways, and then you can also try to explore that if you can show me some other way also to access this operating system, the machine, that would be great. Okay. So that's it from my side. Just download the VM and try to complete this lab and submit it in the first day of this week. That was Sunday. Okay.
Okay, so we just have to do these three
Yeah.
once. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I will stop